Some clues from pharaonic Egypt suggest men loved men. Scribes just didn't write it plainly. Hi guys, welcome back to History for Sleep. On a Saqqara tomb wall, two officials stand nose to nose like husband and wife. Their families are carved beside them, but their closeness steals the scene. Court gossip from a later tale hints at a king slipping out at night to visit a male favorite. Love songs talk about longing without naming gender. Temple rules obsess over purity, yet leave awkward silences you can feel between the lines. Were these signs of accepted intimacy careful code, or stories that later readers cleaned up? What survived is fragmentary carvings, rumors, and gaps. But together they point to a private world we're only starting to see. Comment the exact time you're watching sunrise, midnight, or in between. If this opened a new angle on Egypt for you, tap like so the story reaches farther. You hear it first. A hush ripples over the Nile like silk pulled tight. And your heart leans into the dark, because night is when truth walks without sandals. Thebes exhales the heat, and the city begins to glow at the edges. You pad along the quay where cargo boats nudge like sleepy cattle ropes creak and lanterns breathe small gold halos on the water. The East Bank Karnak in Luxor holds its colonnades like ribs. The West Bank rises into tomb hills that keep their own counsel. Beer froth, date syrup, and frankincense braid the air with the faint bite of natron on laundry lines. You learn the city by listening. Thebes runs on a social map, more exact than any papyrus plan, a network of eyes and expectations, charted alley by alley. Hear the potter's block rough-handed and warm singing as they carry jars. They're scribes from the estate of Amun, ink-stained fond of clever talk and careful cups of wine. Between them, the weavers, sandal makers, and women with henna'd fingers selling lotus garlands that make everyone look 2 heartbeats braver. You pass a courtyard where a family dines in the open. Clay lamps hang like small moons from a palm beam, and laughter rises with steam from a stew. On the rooftop, 2 brothers point out constellations the way soldiers and boatmen do when the breeze is kind. In the lane's windows are more suggestion than boundary reed screens broken plaster and gaps that turn into watching places. Privacy is a craft, and everyone is a little bit of an artisan. At a beer shop, the doorway curtain shivers with each arrival. Inside, benches line the walls. The owner, practical and kind, pretends not to notice when certain guests take the corner table and talk about everything except what their eyes are saying. A lute begins a melody. A hand drum decides to be bold. Conversation here is a woven mat sturdy with jokes lifted by gossip patterned with small risks. Have you ever sat where the most meaningful sentence is the one nobody speaks? Across the alley, a perfumer crushes blue lotus and myrrh, measuring drops with the seriousness of a scribe counting barley. He sells scent cones that look innocent until they melt and travel. A single cone on a wig can announce a person from half a courtyard away the way a favorite ringtone gives someone away before they speak. Tonight, a cone warms on the head of a court musician who pauses a heartbeat too long beside an off-duty guard. You keep moving, because movement is safety. At a small shrine, a woman lights an oil cup for Hathor. The flame returns a steady face. A boy runs past with a jar for the gatekeepers at Luxor. He grins like he knows a secret, which he does, because boys are couriers for many kinds of message. In a world that worships mot balance and rightness, words travel like boats in the current. Some carry offerings, some questions, and some trouble with a smile. You test the current with a quiet question of your own. It hides beneath talk of bread prices and festival dates. Who meets whom when the drums of Opet are loudest and the city forgets to be cautious? Who lingers under the sycamore outside the scribe's quarter when the last lamp is pinched? Who arrives at the boat ramp just late enough to be early? Cities everywhere use noise as camouflage. Thebes turns ceremony into cover. Back by the river, a bark glides past priests, white as starlight, against the deck carrying a god who will sleep in a temporary house until morning. The city is synchronized to ritual, but human hearts do not clock out when the sanctuary closes. In that overlap between devotion and desire, between what is praised in public and what is guarded in private, the social map is drawn and redrawn, night after night. A breath of wind brings laughter from a balcony. Two neighbors trade a story about a temple steward whose reputation is cleaner than his accounts, and in the telling, a half-dozen side glances pass among the listeners. Reputation here is a kind of amulet, worn outside the tunic. People polish it in daylight and handle it carefully after dark, aware that the wrong rumor can topple a household faster than a cracked beam. At the key, there is a pause, the sort that feels like the city blinking. A cat crosses with professional indifference. You are no cat, but you learn quickly where to slow down, where to look once, and then pretend you didn't. Where palm fronds lean just so along a garden wall, making a screen generous enough for one more shadow. The map of night is not a diagram. It is choreography, and the music is confidence. Before the moon climbs higher, you fold this map and slip it behind your ribs. Beer shops that double as lullabies, rooftops that double as observatories, alley windows that double as stages. Walk soft, watch well, and let the city teach you what it allows and what it forgives. Thebes posts no instructions. It offers them if you listen with the whole body, the way you listen for oarlocks clicking in the dark. You start collecting words the way you collected glances at the beer shop, one by one, palm over palm, until your hand feels heavier. Egyptians love to talk without saying the thing out loud, and once you tune your ear to it, you hear a whole second river running beneath the Nile of everyday speech. The broken potsherds. The ostraca are your best teachers because they're scrubbed scratch pads, practice lines, shopping lists, jokes too quick for papyrus, and little poems that would blush if they had cheeks. On a shard no bigger than your palm, someone rehearses a love lyric from memory, the ink still brown and confident. It uses the everyday word brother for lover, not because they can't find another term, but because that's how tenderness works in these songs, family closeness repurposed into private devotion. You know the pattern from the roof at Thebes, people borrowing safe words so that risky feelings can find a quiet chair. When a young mason writes, "My brother comes," nobody kicks the door in. They nod because brothers bring figs news, and also reasons to linger by the stair. Lotus flowers do a lot of heavy lifting too. A lotus isn't just a flower, it's a floating invitation. I will reach for the lotus means I will reach for what calms and excites. Which might be perfume, might be music, and might be the person who smells like both. A cup of beer can be a cup of courage, and Let Us Drink isn't only about barley. The city you walked last night teaches the same lesson the scent cone tells on you before you arrive. So does a cone in a sentence, melting slowly until the point is clear. You meet euphemisms that work like shutters open just enough to let in the breeze, closed enough to keep the neighbors agreeable. To find shade is a favorite. Shade is practical in Egypt, a kindness in noon heat and a cover after dusk. To find shade with someone promises relief without specifying from what. To sleep in the house of a friend sounds like hospitality and often is, yet no one writes that line unless the friend is special. Hospitality has a shape. Desire presses a different dent in the mattress. Insults travel on the same roads carrying the opposite cargo. They rarely say what they mean, because a bald insult is both dangerous and dull. Instead, they glide behind reputation words. He's not straight means more here than posture. He is not pure speaks to ritual, but also to rumor. He makes himself small can be humility or humiliation depending on tone. Have you noticed how every city invents a way to judge without naming? Thebes uses a scale of dignity, who holds it well, who spills it, who borrows someone else's and tries to pass. A satirical note might call a man soft, like baked clay, which sounds like a baker's compliment, until you hear the laughter that follows. Scribes love wordplay, and you learn their craft by eavesdropping on ink. The word for love coils out of everyday roots, wanting, wishing, pleasing. And that's useful because it means love can be sketched as a preference rather than a crime. When a worker writes, "I like to be with my companion," the verb is so ordinary it passes inspection, yet the repetition of with does the quiet, meaningful work. 2 withs equals a weekend. 3 withs equals a story your aunt pretends not to know. You keep your footing by remembering mot, order, balance, rightness, because language bends around it. People don't want to be accused of tipping the scales, so they describe closeness as mutual obligation. We keep watch, we lift together, we sit at dawn. A pair is acceptable if the pair is useful, and paired usefulness gives cover to paired affection. A note from a work crew at Deir el Medina lists who shared a lamp for the night shift. Lamps are scarce, so this is logistics, and yet the order of names tells its own tale. You learn to read lists like doorways. Songs the ones sung in courtyards and beer shops are braver than letters, because a tune can hide a dare. A verse about 2 reeds leaning together on the canal sounds like botany until the rhythm lingers on the word together. Someone thumps the drum a little slower, and the reed bed turns into a private room. If you hum along, you become an accomplice, which is a polite Egyptian art. Would you risk a harmony if the person across the table risked an echo? You also meet the helpful vagueness of delight. Delight is the Swiss Army knife of Nile vocabulary. You can be delighted by figs by the moon on the river, by the scribe who pretends he's looking for his lost stylus, while standing exactly where your lamplight makes his face generous. He delights me is not inherently scandalous, so it walks through checkpoints. Once inside, it closes the door and sets down its bag. Not every whisper is kind. You read a fragment where a man complains that his rival goes about like a festival mask, which is a way to say he performs for attention. Performance is a double-edged coal stick, fabulous at highlighting beauty, risky when the line is too dark. During processions, men and women take on roles, sometimes crossing them for the sake of the god, and everyone cheers because festivals make the rules stretch. Afterward, language remembers who stretched how far. He, as a festival man, becomes shorthand for someone whose gestures are too graceful for the work yard and too captivating to dismiss. The priest's registers, dry as desert bread, still teach you tricks. They avoid naming sin. They don't want to advertise, so they write abomination as a category and move along. Categories are tidy, but people are not tidy, and so households invent local dialects of discretion. A mother might grumble that her son visits the potter's lane too often, which is technically true if the potter's nephew is the reason. The potter's lane becomes code, like the sycamore you passed last night, like the quiet corner in the beer shop where the drumbeat knows when to hush. You try a test at dawn, when the market reopens and the city smells like damp reeds and hot bread. You ask a scribe where to find good company, and he smiles because you've said nothing dangerous and everything necessary. He tells you to look for the stall with the freshest garlic and then follow your nose for the blue lotus, which is either culinary advice or the closest thing Egypt has to a wink. You buy garlic, you find lotus, and between them, a conversation opens about companionship during the flood season, which any farmer knows can be long and requires patience. At the edge of the quay, you practice noticing like a native, listening for repetition for words that arrive too often to be innocent, for verbs that never claim an object because the object is already understood. The map you folded behind your ribs, beer shops, rooftops, generous palm fronds now gets captions. Fine shade, delight, my brother, festival man. None of these break a law by themselves. Together they sketch a life people recognize even if they swear they've never seen it. You step from the beer shop into a story because in Egypt the gods don't stay on their pedestals. They walk into alleys and rearrange the furniture. The night's mild lamps make honey-colored puddles, and you remember what the scribes taught you. Listen for double meanings. The temples have been doing that forever. When priests chant in measured tones, they are also whispering cultural permissions. You hear the old quarrel, first the one every child learns like a multiplication table, Horus and Set contending for the throne. It's politics wearing a divine mask. Court cases boasts trials and pranks that would not be out of place in a messy family inheritance. The gods convene like a council board. Ninth offers cool advice. Re gets tired. People change allies after lunch. What matters for your ear is how the myth treats closeness and humiliation as tools of power. There's a prank with a salad, a joke that depends on who controls whose story the next morning. And a courtroom moment where reputation is weighed like grain. You've met that scale already in Thebes. The myth just raises the stakes, turns rumor into ritual, and lets everyone practice thinking about dignity without naming anything too directly. You notice something else. Horus wins not by being the strongest, but by mastering performance, presenting himself as orderly, measured a friend of Mot. Meanwhile, Set overreaches, tries his spectacle, and trips on his own thunder. Haven't you seen that at the beer shop table, the loud gesture that curdles by sunrise, while the quiet one endures myths? Make these lessons portable. People carry them in their heads and set them down on their own courtyards when needed. Now look at Hapi, the Nile itself, personified. Hapi is a he, yet he's pictured with a soft belly and generous chest, wearing plants of both banks a walking harvest. No one faints, everyone nods. Abundance is a mixed harmony, and the river doesn't consult our tidy categories before flooding. If you're counting cultural signals, that's a large one. The most important life giver in the country blends traits and the kingdom thrives. When you saw two brothers charting stars on the rooftop, this was already in the sky, notes. Dualities, braided, opposites made domestic. You pass a doorway painted with Hathor's sistrum and hear the giggling memory of her festival, the one that loosens shoulders and lets music do what sermonizing can't. Festivals are exactly where bodies learn roles, can flex safely. A man in a feathered crown may take a part usually sung by a woman not as mockery, but as devotion. The audience cheers because the god is pleased, and the harvest would like to continue. When work resumes the next morning, people remember who danced what and how joyful everyone looked. And they carry that picture like an amulet against small-mindedness. Isn't it easier to be kind to your neighbor's quiet differences when you've watched the temple itself rehearse generosity? Then there's autumn on the horizon mound, a creation story that winks at the idea that life starts from a single being, doing what no committee can legislate. Priests smile and keep the language lofty. Farmers smile and understand anyway. The point is not a diagram. The point is elasticity. The world begins from unexpected motion, and if beginnings are elastic, perhaps social endings shouldn't be too rigid. You tuck that thought beside your folded map, a culture that handles cosmic beginnings with a shrug, is unlikely to panic at small human variations, at least not everywhere, not all the time. Step into the Osiris cycle for a moment. Isis and Osiris are siblings and lovers, their union a royal template. You don't need to copy their map to see how it expands the idea of what bonds preserve the state. The message to the street is practical. A household's stability matters more than outsiders' opinions about its internal wiring. That's why when a neighbor drops the phrase, "My brother, your ear," knows it might mean household affection, chosen loyalty, or the kind of tenderness that keeps the lamp burning past midnight. Myth guards the household. Rumor pokes it. You keep walking. Bess peeks from a lintel, big-headed tongue out, the god of bedroom jokes and lullabies. He's the temple's permission to keep humor in the house, even when life is hard. If people trust a dwarf god to protect love and sleep, they also learn to treat intimacy as everyday, not as theatrical scandal. You saw how scent cones travel, how a melody can hide a dare. Bess explains why the world doesn't end when somebody notices. It just yawns and grins and tells you to shut the door properly. The more you listen, the more you realize how myth provides scripts for reading and misreading. In the Horus Set trial, the wrong tale told at the wrong time becomes a weapon. The right countertale restores face. That's exactly what reputation feels like in Thebes. The salvaged dignity matters more than forensic detail. You watch a perfumer sell a new batch of lotus and think this culture knows that fragrance changes the story before the words arrive. Isn't that how memory works too? Your path takes you past a relief where the king embraces Amun, foreheads touching. It's not romance. It's legitimation, closeness, used as a public language of favor. The sight trains the eye for paired images, two figures standing in mirrored grace. When you later glimpse two workmen leaning under the sycamore in a similar symmetry, your mind, already fluent in paired poses, understands without being told. Temples teach composition. The streets apply it. There are cautions woven in, set as necessary. Storms are part of weather, but he is also a reminder that appetite without mut becomes hazard. That's why Egyptian stories love self-control that doesn't cancel warmth. A good person knows when to laugh and when to leave. A wise person knows which jokes are too expensive. You hear a drummer miss a beat in the beer shop when someone's tease goes sharp. The room edits itself. Myth has rehearsed the edit. Do you feel how the divine crowd lowers the temperature of shame? If gods can switch roles, if the river can be abundant in multiple registers, if the throne can be won by careful reputation instead of brute swagger, then a household can be kept with tact instead of panic. That's not a manifesto. It's a muscle memory. When a scribe writes, "I find shade with my companion," he trusts the audience to sort meaning like grain chaff to the wind seed to the jar. Myths taught the sorting. You end the night where you started, by the water. Priests guide a bark through the dark, and you feel the city breathe with them, steady practiced. The tales you've been hearing are not gossip dressed up. They're workshop manuals for being complicated without breaking. Tomorrow, when the market reopens and someone reaches for a lotus the way a person reaches for a hand, you'll recognize the choreography. The script is old, the actors are new, and the audience, if it's kind, will clap softly and mind its own stew. Bolt the door, and the whole house still has ears. The floor is cool clay under your soles as you step from the street into a mud brick shell shaped by habit and heat. A small threshold, a quick right, and you're in the front room, low benches built into the wall like steadying hands, a niche for household gods, where Bess grins and Taweret keeps watch over sleep and small mercies. The plaster remembers every season. A faint blue where someone once painted lotus petals, a touch of red where a pillar was decorated for a festival and never quite returned to ordinary. You breathe in bread and rush mat dust, and the air does that familiar Egyptian trick, dry in the shade, honeyed where a shaft of sun finds a jar. A courtyard holds the household together, quern stones at one side where a woman every morning sings her rhythm into grain, a bread oven near the back that turns barley into the smell of patience. Chickens mutter, a cat claims the last warm square of afternoon, and a water jar sweats like a hard-working ox. Roof stairs climb along the wall, each step worn down the way habits are. At night, mattresses go to the roof. By dawn, people fold them away and keep the night stories under the same ties that keep the house standing. Privacy, like a good jar, is always handmade. Windows are high and small. Reed screens tilt toward mercy. Door bolts slide with a wooden sigh that everyone on the lane recognizes. Families live layered, grandmother, aunt, cousins, so every whisper must pass an audience test. You learn to talk in ordinary tasks, to tuck meaning beneath errands. Take this basket to the potter can mean exactly that, or something shaded by the potter's nephew's laugh. Remember the language you've been collecting? Find shade. Delight, my brother, now it finds walls and corners to live in. The rooftop is school and theater. In hot months, it is where you sleep, breathe, and let the city's many small winds teach you patience. It's also where neighbors become constellations across the lanes, known by silhouette, by cough, by the clink of a jug. Two figures lean against a parapet, and the pose is familiar from temple reliefs. The balanced pair mirror still, only this time, there's laundry steaming on a line and a clay goose whistle on the ledge. A child chasing a beetle downstairs creates the perfect cover for two adults to linger a heartbeat longer by the stairhead. Do you have a rooftop in your life, somewhere public and private at once, like the last carriage on a subway or the quiet shelf in a library? Inside the main room wears its respectability like linen, clean, visible, rehearsed. A guest sits there with figs, while voices from deeper rooms float like incense from a brazier left burning. The rear room cooler is where valuables and rumors keep. A trapdoor leads down to the cellar. Granary bins sit like sleeping hippos. A spare lamp waits for someone brave enough to sign for it. In Deir el Medina houses, you'd see a small shrine shelf where the owner leaves small offerings and bigger worries. The shelf hears more prayers than the temple when the gate is a long walk. A message left at the shrine, 2 lotus petals set just so, can be a timetable more accurate than any water clock. Courtyards are meetings with plausible deniability. A neighbor drops by with a jar of beer. Someone else returns a borrowed tool. A cousin comes to ask about a wedding quilt. All of them genuine errands that also supply timing. When the house swells with voices, a pair can vanish to the roof to check the mats, or down to the cellar to count grain. Ordinary sentences that make a parent nod and a sibling roll their eyes without raising a shout. Egyptian households function like good festivals. Rules bend without breaking, and the god call it dignity. Call it mat still gets honored at sundown. Beer houses are the satellite living rooms of this world. The owner manages temperature and temperament with the same hand. A lute in the corner waits to forgive awkward silences. The curtain at the doorway flutters as if practicing discretion. You sit on a bench, elbows close, and the room agrees to ignore the way glances keep finding the same compass point. The drummer knows when to make noise and when to fold the rhythm like a napkin. Have you ever watched a place protect you without saying it does? As if the furniture, the light, the bowl of roasted chickpeas, and the owner's bored expression were all part of a safety plan. You learn the art of the plausible swap. 2 friends trade tasks. One takes the water jars to the river at dusk, the other covers the grinding at dawn, so each has a pocket of time that belongs to no one else's schedule. A sister offers to braid a wig on the roof, while her brother fetches the extra oil. And in the braiding and fetching, the household becomes a cooperative, its moving parts doing what families do, making space. Even the cat participates, choosing to nap exactly where a door needs to look closed from the lane, while staying a finger width ajar. Furniture keeps secrets in plain view. Wall benches double as beds. Chest lids double as tables. A basket of onions conveniently blocks a sightline. In wealthier homes, a doorkeeper might sit under a sycamore outside, which means arrivals require the right sequence of small talk. How is your knee? How fares the dog is the north wind kind. By the third question, anyone with real business has learned if the doorkeeper is in a generous mood. In smaller houses, your doorkeeper is pure choreography: how loudly you bolt, how quickly you unbolt, how convincingly you fuss about the lamp. Domestic religion smooths the surface. When someone lights a wick before towerette, eyes focus on the flame and not on the footsteps returning from the roof. Offerings to Bess increase in festivals, when jokes are allowed to be bigger, and everyone pretends they don't know why there are extra scent cones in the jar. Remember that scent cone that tells on you. In a clever house, it tells a slightly different story, shifted by a window's breeze and a bowl of caraway, so that the right person understands and the wrong person only thinks the room smells festive. Reputation. The city's portable amulet meets its most skilled caretakers indoors. A matron can reframe a rumor by deciding which room to host a conversation in. A father can unstick a sticky remark by inviting the remark's author to dinner and making him laugh before the soup. Satire cut with generosity goes down like good beer. Someone says a young man is a festival mask, and an aunt replies, "May all masks bring joy," as Hathor teaches, and the room nods, because the aunt has turned a jab into a proverb while handing out more bread. You feel how homes practice diplomacy the way temples practice incense. Nights lengthen during flood season. Drums travel farther. Rooftops grow friendlier. A household that has learned the choreography, stare screen lamp neighbors cough, becomes an instrument that plays quiet songs very well. No one writes sheet music for this. It is an oral tradition of survival and kindness, updated each evening. When the moon climbs, you fold yourself into the house's rhythm. The cat's small empire, the oven's settling clicks, the roof mat's faint straw aura. The slow drift of a scent cone that makes a path like a whisper you can follow with your eyes half closed. The day begins with a list, and you learn to hear a heartbeat inside it. Year X, month Y days. See the scribe intones at Deir el Medina, the village they call the place of truth. Two gangs left and right stand ready to cut the king's tomb deeper into limestone. The scribe's pen travels Hori present, Senedjem present, Ka present. Nefer went to brew beer. Hui stung by scorpion. It's logistics on the surface, but each line opens a little door. A person is more than present. He is present with someone loyal to someone teased by someone silently guarded by someone else. You shoulder a basket of chisels and follow the crew up the path past tamarisk and the small shrines villagers tuck into the rock. Stone dust tastes like ground chalk. The sun throws white heat at the cliff, and the men make shade with their bodies until the foreman clears his throat. Oaths bind the day before any tool touches stone to Mat, to the king's quiet house underground, to each other. The oath is not poetry. It is simple and muscular, like the handshakes you've seen at the beer shop that swear I am with you without a speech. Have you noticed how the most durable promises use the smallest words? Work then in the narrow corridors. A chisel rings, a mallet replies. Two men always in tandem, one bracing, one striking, then swapping a rhythm that mends the hours. The gangs carry nicknames the way you once carried scent cones, Pa Eerie, the clever Hui, the small Nebmate, the silent. A nickname is both a shield and an invitation. Say it with warmth, and you're inside the circle. Say it wrong, and the corridor grows colder by 10 degrees. At midday, the register teaches you more than gossip ever could. Shared lamp Hori with Buta Hamun. Night guard Nefer with Pa Eerie. Lamps matter in the dark. To share one is to share breath and schedule and excuses. The scribe doesn't comment. He records. But you have learned the downtown language from the beer shop and the rooftops. With can carry weight quietly. A pair that works well often eats together. Borrows together, offers a spare reed pen when the other splits. Before long with becomes with, even when no lamp needs lighting. Notes and nicknames run like a second plot beneath the cutting of stone. A potsherd shows up in the scribe's bag, a clipped complaint about Pa Eerie borrowing the new chisel too often signed with exaggerated courtesy. Another Ostrakhan carries a love song copied in a neat hand. After hours, Kenherkep Chef, the scribe with a personal library, is known to save such things, my brother. Come, for my heart is in your hand. Brother, there it is, again the safe word. Doing heavy lifting, the hopeful turn of phrase that lets a feeling wear work clothes. You breathe the crew's inside humor. A man who tries to pose like a noble in a festival once gets called the festival mask for a month. Another who always smells faintly of blue lotus becomes Conehead said with affection because the village knows he sings better after the scent melts down his wig. Reputation bends here under the strain of long days and tight quarters until it fits human bodies. The quarry knows who teases to flirt and who teases to wound. It knows the difference between a grin and a sneer. And the difference lasts longer than the cut of any chisel. Power has its rough edges, and you catch a glimpse of how a foreman can bruise the balance of the whole village. People still murmur about Paneb, a foreman accused in the time of the Ramessides of abuses of office and the mishandling of boundaries. Amenakti, a scribe, put the charges to writing in what later readers would call a dossier. You read the story sideways, through what the crew doesn't say. They tighten around each other when leadership misbehaves. They borrow dignity from the oath to Mat when an official's dignity fails him. It's the same muscle the beer shop drummer exercises when he folds the rhythm to diffuse a joke gone sharp. Institutions stumble. Crews hold. Rations make or break a week. Barley arrives late. An entry suddenly reads, absent hungry. In the reign of Ramesses III, men finally put down their tools and walked to a temple to protest the first recorded labor strike. They do not demand luxury, they demand grain that is owed, and they speak in the respectful cadence of men who understand Mat, but will not be quiet when Mat goes missing. That threads straight into the quiet, loves your tracking. A village that learns to defend its rations learns to defend its people. If you will stand together for bread, you will stand together for each other's dignity when the lanterns are low. Out on the cliff, you watch the buddy systems that are never written into law. A pair heads off to fetch water at dusk. No one checks because water jars always need filling. On the return, their steps slow near a bend in the path, where the rock throws back just enough shade to earn its Egyptian verb. Finding shade has always been practical here. Now, it becomes an art. A reed mat leaned against a wall becomes a screen, generous enough for one more shadow as you learned your first night in Thebes. The village has many small approved reasons to pause. People arrange themselves so those pauses fit the right bodies. Graffiti in the royal valleys tells you the crews are not shy about memorializing friendship. Nib Mat came here with his beloved companion. Scratched small near a guardian figure is not an outrage. It's a blessing to the work. You also see little figures drawn in symmetrical pairs, with arms slung easily, a common gesture the painters have taught everybody to read as intimacy without alarm. The iconography from the temples the king embraced by the god the twinned forms under the sun disk, has trained the eye to accept a paired composition as a language of favor. The crews inherit that literacy and use it. Back in the village dinner, steam rises and clay ovens cluck. Attendance still matters, so the scribe's evening note will show who slept in the village and who slept in the valley. The second entry is dull to outsiders and useful to those who understand that the valley has huts, and huts have lamps, and lamps sometimes get shared. A basket of onions sits in a doorway, exactly where it needs to be, so that a passerby cannot see the fourth step of a roof stair. The cat decides to nap on the threshold like a doorkeeper with whiskers. The whole house participates in the choreography you've been studying. Stair, screen, lamp, cough, hush. When the roster closes, the scribe sands the last wet line and the gangs loosen. You walk down with them as the cliff gives back its heat. Someone hums a love song softened to a work chant. Someone else practices a polite lie for his aunt in case she asks where he found so much delight on a work day. The nicknames travel ahead of their owners: Conehead, the festival man; Silent Neb Mutt, and a hand rests on a shoulder a half-second longer than it needs to for balance. The register says only present, but you have learned to read present with, and that tiny preposition is enough to light a lamp. Morning starts on the river because armies here move on water as much as on sand. You take your place on a troop boat while the sun irons the Nile flat and bright. Oars creak in a rhythm that makes the day feel measured before the first order is shouted. The quartermaster reads the crew list like a temple litany: rowers by pair, archers by pair, watch by pair, because nothing in this machine works alone. Your benchmate becomes your calendar, your shade, your complaint department, your laughter when the wind won't cooperate. Camp smells like reed mats, goat hide, and last night's stew reheated into courage. Tents line up in neat rows at the garrison stakes, hammered with the same precision you saw in the tomb corridors. You roll out sleeping gear, and there it is again, the tiny preposition that changes the room with. You sleep with your partner because the night is long and watch turns are easier when you don't have to argue with a stranger about the angle of the shield at the door. Two blankets overlap like treaty lines. Learn where to place a lamp so it can be called a lamp and still be more than light. The officers prefer orders spoken in clipped syllables. Soldiers enforce order by inventing jokes. A wiry Nubian scout from the Medjay today, serving as garrison police, taps a tent pole and says, if it stands straight, the commander smiles. If it leans, he thinks of Set. Everyone laughs, not because of the god's punchline, but because the joke tucks fear back into its scabbard. Medjay run the perimeter with feline calm. You watch how they pair up without fuss mirrors of the paired charioteers you'll see later. One to drive, one to shoot, both to survive. Letters get delivered before noon, home news, folded into thin packets. You borrow a stylus from a scribe attached to the unit and copy a line you've seen before on village ostraca. Only now it belongs to the river, my brother. The river carries me. My heart rests when I am with you. Brother keeps doing its good, sturdy work, traveling safer than a bold declaration would. A man from Elephantine snorts, pretends to tease, which brother, and then offers dried dates, a truce, and a kindness in the same motion. Have you noticed how a shared ration can turn into a shared grammar? The march south to the forts Buhen Semna Uranarti gives you time to learn the rank words. The Mir, the overseer. The Naktu, the strong one. The Mary, the beloved of the king, and someone has earned favor in an inscription. Inscribed autobiographies carved by veterans like Ahmoz, son of Abana, brag about valor and rewards, yes. But if you listen between the chisels, you hear the chorus of, I boarded with my comrades. We took the enemy boat. We returned together. War stories declare singular heroism. The grammar always betrays that victory is plural. On the road, your mess group becomes a small household, the kind you've practiced reading a shared jar, a shared joke, a shared lie for the officer when someone oversleeps. One man knows how to fix a sandal strap with a twist of leather. Another can coax fire from stingy twigs. A third remembers festival songs that turn a rotten mood. Pairs glue this into something stable. You fetch water with Hori. You check bowstrings with Bach. You stand second watch with my companion. The roll of names becomes a rhythm like the boat oars. If someone scribbles it down, it won't look scandalous. If you've learned the neighborhood language, it will look like a map of pulse points. You drill with the chariot corps on a hard-packed stretch near the river horses, snorting wheels, biting. A chariot is a friendship on wheels, driver and archer moving as one body around sudden turns. A driver who leans too late tips the car. An archer who hurries wastes arrows. The best pairs look bored while succeeding. You watch their shorthand. 2 clicks of the tongue means brace a tug on the reins, means brace harder. If the archer cracks a smile when the driver wraps a cloth at his wrist before practice, no one arrests a smile. On festival days, those same men wear linen that smells faintly of lotus. And the scent makes the chariot shed feel like an expensive joke shared among equals. Campaign talk brings up the great names because soldiers like to measure themselves against legends. Thutmose III's marches counted like beads. Ramesses II's boast Kadesh, retold with eye rolls and a shrug. Horemheb, the general who cleaned the ranks before wearing the crown. Their reliefs show lines of identical soldiers. But your camp proves individuality refuses to be sanded flat. One man's laugh wakes a row. Another's silence holds it steady. A third keeps a lucky amulet of Bess tucked in his belt guardianship for nights when the tent cloth snaps and the desert seems to walk on legs. In the cool hour after drill, the boatmen teach you river tricks. How to coil rope so it matters later, how to read the water's skin for a hidden cross-current, how to tell a noble's barge from a troop boat by the sound it makes hitting the bank. They pair up too, because river work punishes soloists. You learn how fingers can signal a whole sentence stay. Wait. Now. If you've ever ridden a long bus and shared a playlist with the person beside you, one earbud for each, you already understand how the river creates an intimacy that belongs to timing rather than to speeches. There are warnings, and they matter. An officer's favor can ruin a tent if he forgets mutt and expects laughter to mean permission. You've seen this in other rooms. Remember the dossier-style complaints about Paneb's abuses, and the fix is the same crew's close ranks. Humor goes careful, the drummer folds the rhythm. The unit's mother figure, the cook, often becomes the temperature gauge. When she stops teasing, the camp knows to pay attention. Dignity is the god everyone quietly wants to keep fed. Night on campaign is a school in breathing together. Paired watch shifts start before the bats finish their sketches across the sky. 2 silhouettes talk about everything but the point bread, a sore knee. Which temple festival at home has the best beer? Whether the stars here look sharper than they do above Thebes. In the break between topics, the tent remembers a scent cone from a city far upriver, and the silence isn't empty. It's named. The lamp sits where it sits. The blankets overlap where they overlap. Have you ever noticed how the body's smallest decisions, where to set a heel, how long to leave a hand, tell a story that never needs a narrator on the return journey boat? Stern low with spoils and letters, you stand at the rail and let the wind solve your sweat. The oars settle into their old hymn. The banks slide like a painted scroll. Names on the roster mean more now. Hori, who drives like the horses owe him money. Bach, who sings off-key but never stops. The Medjay scout, whose jokes save the day's last inch of grace. You have learned the garrison's grammar pair, and how it protects what it needs to protect without announcing itself. The river pretends nothing happened. The river remembers everything. Push this gate, and your breath becomes paperwork. Sand crunches under your heel as you step across the temple threshold and feel the temperature drop like a rule being spoken. Outside, soldiers solve days by pairing blankets. Inside, priests solve days by pairing purity with performance. The precinct is a city within a city. Outer courts for the crowd, hypostyle forests where light arrives pre-filtered and deeper rooms graded like secrets. A doorkeeper checks who may pass, not by fame, but by cleanliness, shaved, head-washed body, natron-scrubbed hands, linen that tells the nose it saw the laundry basin at dawn. Have you ever noticed how a fresh shirt can change your behavior for the whole afternoon? Purity here is not a sermon, but a timetable. Wab priests rotate through abstentions, the way boat crews rotate watches, no garlic before a rite, no fish that crawls from the mud, no spicy beer. If the god dislikes jokes that day, and a quiet stretch from certain pleasures before sleeping in the god's house. You watched roof mats become observatories in Thebes. Here, the mat beside the holy bark is a boundary line with a polite smile. Lector priests mouth the words that wake the statue, a choreography of syllables that sound like the river turned into law. The leopard skin of a Sem priest drapes over a white kilt wildness anchored to order, which is Egypt's preferred mood. The sacred drama begins, and you hear echoes of the city's private scripts disguised as myth. In festival plays, a man voices a goddess because the role is the road. The god cares about accuracy of feeling, not the plumbing of the actor. On Hathor's day, musicians with cones melting on their wigs rattle Sistra until shoulders release, and people remember that joy is a duty. The festival of drunkenness, remembered at Karnak's precinct of Mut, uses wine to reenact how the world was saved from Sekhmet's fury. Not an invitation to messiness, but a licensed unshouldering. Permission loosens the knots you saw tied tight on rooftops. For a few hours, the city admits that people carry mixed weather inside them and lets the rain fall. Boundaries police bodies, but they also create little coves of safety in the lee of the rule. The scribe's room off the hypostyle, with pallets laid like bones and a pot of black and red ink, is a hush where friendship can last an extra minute after an inventory is finished. The magazine storerooms of oils and linens smell like the inside of a blue lotus jar, and a pair of attendants align amphorae with exaggerated seriousness while discussing who will carry the canopy in Opet. The canopy question is logistics. The way with keeps returning is grammar. Orders written on a straka sound like ledgers. If you can read downtown, they also sound like glances. The great festivals turn the whole precinct into a moving shelter. During Opet, Amun travels from Karnak to Luxor on a bark padded like a royal cradle. Priests bear the poles, soldiers clear the way. Singers, women titled Shemayet, professional musicians of the temple, give the air its ladder. Streets become curtains. In the press of celebration, the crowd's attention finally points somewhere else, and a person who needs shade can find it. You watch a pair peel off toward a sycamore near the sacred lake, the tree that seems to be everywhere you look, and you think of rooftop figures across lanes in Thebes. Temples never say we will chaperone mercy. They simply organize enough noise to drown small freedoms in the drum. Authority corrects, and it can bite. A purity violation can send someone back to the washing room with a set of side eyes heavy enough to bruise. A lector who plays the festival mass too enthusiastically on an ordinary day earns a cough from the senior priest that carries 10 paragraphs. Oracles decide reputations more than once. You remember dear El Medina carrying petitions to statues that nod yes or no under their bearers' hands. When the god's answer turns sour, an ant in the audience suddenly remembers another detail, and you watch how a community rehabilitates a person by giving them the exact chore that proves reliability for 3 weeks straight. Names with long gravitas walk these corridors, and you borrow their shadows. The god's wife of Amun, a powerful office held by royal women in later periods, takes on imagery usually reserved for kings to ensure the god's favor. Gender makes a costume change in full daylight, and the temple nods because offerings keep arriving. Horemheb, before he wore the crown, reorganized priestly ranks. Scribes like Butahamen copy ritual texts you can hear in your bones before you catch each word. The practitioners are humans, with knees that ache and jokes that misfire. A Sem priest stifles a sneeze during the opening of the mouth ceremony, and the whole room almost giggles the way a choir will when a hymn flirts with disaster. Household gods trail their incense into the precinct. Bess stares from cosmetic spoons tucked in a coffer. Taweret waddles across amulets on a musician's string bag. This is how boundaries learn to be kind. The grand gods bring the small gods along. In the back workshops, goldsmiths set inlays for sacred emblems. A master teaches an apprentice by guiding his wrist, no flourish, just pressure and breath. Intimacy justified by craft, protected by the pounding of 1,000 other hammers. Have you ever felt safer in a crowd? Not because anyone sees you, but because everyone is busy. Temple law prefers categories, so it keeps a basket of words, pure, impure, regular day, festival day, and tosses people into them according to schedule. But real days fray. A boy who fetches water to the sanctuary learns which stair squeaks, and the knowledge becomes a kindness he can sell for a favor or gift as a rescue. A gatekeeper recognizes a particular scent cone and pretends to be fascinated by a pigeon some distance away. A singer holds the last note of a hymn half a heartbeat longer until a person clears a threshold and the respectable silence closes like a door behind them. You walk the sacred lake at evening where priestly trainees shave by reflected fire. A senior explains Mott as if balancing a boat too much load on one side, and the hull shows ribs. Shift a sack of barley and the waterline calms. Our job, he says, is to carry the god and the city without spilling either. You hear in that the same math that families do at their ovens and soldiers do in their tents. It is not lenience. It is engineering. When the gates shut, the precinct keeps breathing. Statues are fed, washed, sung to locked. Lamps are trimmed in back rooms. A pair of lector priests rehearse a tricky line until it lands soft. A doorkeeper tells the last petitioner that the god sleeps, and so should they. You pass out into the street where the cats administer night law and the beer houses recover their low thunder. Boundaries did their day's work. They kept harm out mostly. They kept dignity in mostly. And along the edges they left enough unguarded shoreline for 2 reeds to lean together and not snap. The court is a cool room with warm problems. You slip into the back while a doorkeeper counts people as if the tally itself might settle the matter. No law code hangs on the wall, because Egyptians don't love encyclopedias for rules. They love Mat, the habit of balance, applied by humans with good noses. A scribe sits with 2 inks red for headings, black for everything else. Witnesses shuffle like reeds in a wind they didn't order. A statue of a god waits nearby in case an oracle is needed to nod a verdict across the finish line. Reputation walks in first, even when it arrives last. A foreman announces the case in a voice built for list reading: who insulted whom, who borrowed what, and forgot to remember, who called someone not straight in a tone that had nothing to do with posture. The words sound general, because general is safer. And you've learned by now how general can carry a specific, like a jar, carries perfume. Have you ever watched a room measure a sentence by the angle of the speaker's shoulders rather than the grammar Egypt's courts prefer stories to statutes? A man swears by Mot and by his mother's bread of in that he never found shade where he shouldn't. Another says he only used the phrase festival mask as a joke, not a jab. The elders listen for cadence more than vocabulary, the way a good drummer can hear where a beat wanted to go, even if the player missed it. The scribe keeps his pen patient. If an oracle is summoned, the statue's bearers step forward and the god's nod becomes punctuation. A yes can clean a name faster than 10 witnesses. A no can turn a nickname into a shadow that follows a person home. You've already met Paneb's dossier in passing the long complaint that showed how an official's excess bruises a village. That file lives in this room as a cautionary tale. When power tips too far, communities invent counterweights, petitions carried to the temple, satirical songs hummed at low-volume attendance lists that quietly note who slept in the valley. None of these declare a manifesto. Together they create a weather system that can water dignity without naming every plant. Moral teachings, sibate the instructions, lean over your shoulder, like patient uncles. Ptah-hotep whispers about self-control. Dressed as elegance, don't boast, don't grab, don't mock the poor. Keep your face calm, even when your heart dances. The instruction of Ani adds its own lintel to the door. Speak softly, be faithful in your duties. Avoid a mouth faster than the mind. These aren't statutes. They're recipes for not tripping in public. If you wonder how a society polices closeness it doesn't name directly, this is the answer by praising composure so consistently that messiness turns unfashionable. Satire polishes the mirror. The satire of the trades laughs at every profession. But the joke is really about posture, who stands with dignity, even in hard work, who becomes ridiculous by reaching for a grandeur that doesn't fit. When a neighbor calls someone a festival mask, the satire is the subtext. Don't perform your life like a parade float unless the god's actually passing. Remember the chariot shed where linen smelled of lotus? The laughter there knew the line between camaraderie and showiness without needing a law to chart it. You see how tomb inscriptions teach from the far side of life. Autobiographies carved in stone present the resume of a soul. I fed the hungry, I did not tilt the scale. I did not wrong a neighbor, I did not do what is shameful. The phrases are broad by design. Their breadth becomes useful insulation. A person who wants to keep a tender attachment unremarkable can carry virtues like water jars, solid visible, and very few will ask what else fits in the same hand. In the long negative confession recited for the heart's weighing blanket statements about living clean, accomplish two things at once. They express the ideal and smudge the details, in a manner that lets households preserve what they must. Deir el Medina's ostraca give you procedure in miniature. A worker complains that someone makes himself small in public, too much sweetness, he hints. But the foreman writes back about lamp duty and ration tallies, as if to say, prove reliability first and taste second. Another pot shard records a rumor about two brothers who keep sharing watch. A third shard simply lists who returned a tool, and the order of names quietly restores balance by putting the most gossiped pair in the same breath with the village's most trusted. That's strategy disguised as bookkeeping. Defamation matters because a person's name has magic. Spells use names as handles. Households do too. If someone smooths or scuffs your name, you feel it in your stomach the way a boat feels a cross current. Clever people defend names with small architecture. They overperform in public tasks, volunteer for shrine cleaning, make sure the aunt with a dangerous memory always leaves a courtyard with an extra loaf. They also apprentice themselves to respected spaces, scribe rooms, temple kitchens, granaries where someone's good eye can sponsor their reputation. It's like networking without the conference badge. Not every room is fair. An official's smirk can tilt a bench. A neighbor's jealousy can sand a face raw. That's when people use Egypt's portable fixes. They seek an oracle that prefers simplicity to flair. They ask a priest's wife to sing a hymn at their doorway, so the lane hears who visits and why. They arrange the domestic stage lamp, here read screen there, so that even a suspicious cousin sees only civility. You've watched houses practice diplomacy with bread and jokes. The courts simply formalize the same instinct, with ink and witnesses. Relief scenes continue your education. On a wall, a king stands, embraced by a god, foreheads close, arms in parallel. This public grammar of favor trains eyes to read closeness as approval, rather than scandal, provided the posture is composed. Everyday life borrows the template. Two workmen drawn side by side beneath a sun disk may be graffiti, but it's graffiti fluent in official iconography. When people perform dignity, the room is instructed to see favor. Even accusations learn to be careful. A neighbor avoids explicit claim and instead mutters that someone doesn't keep mott at night. The phrase is a net with big holes. It catches only the clumsiest fish, which is the point. Egypt prefers preventing embarrassment to punishing it. If the person in question gets the hint, tightens, jokes, adjusts schedules, asks the god for a well-timed nod, reputation can recover like a reed springing back after a heron leaves. By late afternoon, the case you entered for has softened. The scribe recommends an offering grain to the local chapel service at the next festival, and a period of watchful calm. The room breathes the way Thebes breathes after sunset, when the scent cones begin their private routes and the cats run their patrols. Outside, a boy carries a jar past the beer shop, and you understand why he grins. In this country, law is less about catching you and more about teaching you how not to trip. Morality is a tone of voice. Reputation is the lamp that makes every other object visible without saying its name. You step back into daylight, and the first thing you notice is fabric flirting with light. Linen here is a form of weather shear in summer, pleated into little ridges that remember the reed bed bleached to a quiet brightness by sun and natron. A good kilt, the shendit hangs from a belt like a promise to behave. A Kalasiris dress drapes the body the way the Nile drapes its banks when it's in a tender mood. Tailors in Thebes talk about airflow, like boatmen talk about current, and you begin to read outfits the way you've been reading lists and lamp pairs. Everyone paints their eyes. Not sometimes everyone. Malachite greens for mornings, galena coal, for the sun's glare, smoky lines that make eyelashes into punctuation. The eyeliner keeps flies and glare at bay, yes, but it also turns a glance into a tool you can aim. A fisherman with perfect coal is not unusual. A scribe whose lower lid catches the lamp is not a scandal. You've seen how words carry double meaning. Faces do it too. Have you ever noticed how a little eyeliner makes even a side eye feel like a full sentence? Wigs are honesty in borrowed hair. They're practical, clean scalp, quick change, easy to perfume, and theatrical when required. A short curled wig says I manage accounts and get lunch on time. A layered long wig says I have a festival and I plan to be seen. Into the wax cone set on top, blue lotus myrrh fat that melts slow, you pin a mood. Remember how scent told on you at the beer shop? On feast nights, the cone announces before you turn the corner, and people arrange their faces accordingly. Beauty codes aren't neutral. They're scripts with parts to play. A manly man, the phrase is, their own still oils his skin and shapes his coal, because a dry, cracked face reads as negligence, not virtue. A woman who prefers a simple sheath with clean pleats still knows which bead collar makes a doorway's shade kinder. The town gossips about festival masks, but the ones who earn the nickname are not painted. They're pretending too hard. The real players understand proportion. A touch of ochre on the lip, a rinse of lotus on the wrist, a linen pleat that moves like river light. Subtle choices that move a room's temperature by a degree. Ritual gives you the clearest stage for gender play. We've already walked past Hathor's precinct. Now watch a troupe rehearse for a festival where men take on roles written in the key of goddess swaying shoulders, high wrists, voices pitched for the courtyard's acoustics. No one believes the performers become women. What they become is accurate. The god desires the right feeling, the right shape of joy, the right loosening of the chest, and the precinct agrees to borrow any tool that works. Tomorrow, those same performers will go back to kilts and ledger work, and the only residue will be a little extra grace in how they carry jars. That grace, you notice, lingers in other rooms. Royal imagery makes the rules elastic without saying so. Hatshepsut, a king who is a woman, wears the full package kilt Nemen's headcloth, false beard, masculine titulary, because the office needs those visual verbs to function. Her statues settle into a spectrum, some soft-cheeked, some hard-jawed, all legible as king. The lesson travels down-river presentation is a toolkit for duty, not a cage. You can choose the tool that fits the job and still keep your household on good terms with Mott. Amarna art, during Akhenaten's reign, leans into curves narrow chests that widen into soft bellies, long faces, a tenderness in family scenes that ignores stiff old formulas. Scholars argue their arguments. You just watch the effect it has on viewers. When palatial walls depict the royal body as mixed, ordinary people get used to mixed signals. It doesn't legalize anything new. It normalizes a gaze that isn't startled by softness on a frame that could have been rigid. Later, when styles snap back toward old forms, some of that softness stays in people's eyes. You pause at a wig maker's stall where a young attendant shaved and shining tests a fringe on your brow, laughs at your expression, and sets it straighter. The mirror is a polished copper disc. The face looking back wears the day, like a harbor accepts boats. The attendant's own wig is cut in a style popular with dancing boys, the temple musicians, who rattle sistra and keep the beat honest. Their bracelets tick in time. Their linen is light enough for breeze to draw quick lines across the body, so the audience can read the rhythm. A musician flirts with the crowd for the sake of the goddess. After the performance, he drinks water, eats bread, and becomes somebody's uncle's neighbor again. Household beauty borrows the stage's courage. A husband teases his wife by trying on her bead collar. A wife mocks her husband's coal line and fixes it with expert thumbs. A sister cuts a brother's wig square across the neck because his hand shakes when he tries. He threads amulets on her string bag because his fingers read knots better. Domestic comedy. The realm of Bess keeps gender play friendly. The god's message is simple. Beauty is a shared chore, not a contest. Clothing also hides logistics. A thicker pleat can carry a note. A belt can hide a token, 2 lotus petals in the fold that mean tonight. Weave patterns gossip. The weavers know who ordered which width of linen and whether the request came with too many coins. A garment from the palace workshops seduces by structure alone. A homespun piece seduces by kindness, well-washed, sun-softened, smelling a little of rush mats and a little of myrrh. Which would you choose if you had to talk your way past a doorkeeper? Jewelry writes subtext on the skin. Men wear broad collars, rings, protective amulets. Women wear the same plus ear studs and anklets that turn footsteps into music. A soldier's menet counterweight for Hathor might swing between his shoulder blades during a procession, and no one faints. They clap because the counterweight tells the goddess, "We are here to be moved." In the alleys, the same object tucked under a kilt becomes a private joke. You start to recognize the glimmer of a hidden piece and the way it changes a person's spine. Even work clothes perform. The quarryman's short kilt shows competence. The scribe's clean linen shouts reliability. The laundress's strong arms say, "Trust your linen to me, I will return your dignity folded." When a person bends the coat, adds a fringe, pins a flower, warms the coal line into something stage-worthy. The room decides whether this is confidence or overreach. Confidence earns you bread and a better bench. Overreach earns you the nickname you don't want. The line between them is thin and learned by touch. By evening, the city looks like a backstage after a good show, cones, half-melted beads, unstrung wigs on stands that look like attentive birds. You've spent days reading words, houses, crews, tense courts. Now you read faces, dressed by intention. The grammar is the same shade when you need it. Delight when you can, with when it makes the night shorter. You adjust your own sash, not to pretend to be someone else, but to say with linen what you've been saying with lamps and lists. I know the choreography, and I will dance it kindly. If your name outlives your body, what story does it tell about who you loved? You walk west, where the cliffs fold into honeycomb and the air smells like dust and resin. The necropolis is a city with stricter zoning streets. Our corridors of limestone houses are tombs with doors for the dead, and neighbors are stelae who never sleep. A boy sells you a sprig of dried lotus the way a stadium vendor sells peanuts, and you tuck it behind your ear because the dead enjoy civility. Egyptians live for 2 addresses, this one and the next. And you're here to see how the second keeps secrets and leaves clues. In chapel after chapel, you learn the grammar of eternity. The ka, your appetite, your hunger to be needs. Bread, beer, onions, the whole grocery list. The ba, your roaming bird self, needs a door to fly through. So families carve a false door stack offering lists, paint banquets that never end, and pose the couple like anchors at either side of the table. Sometimes the couple looks exactly like the marriage everyone expects. Sometimes the pose makes room for another symmetry. 2 figures stand nose-to-nose arms, touching as if the sculptor understood that touch is a kind of sentence. You don't force any labels onto stone. You just notice that the composition you've been reading on rooftops and keys, paired bodies, mirrored calm travels beautifully into forever. A pair inside an old kingdom, Mastaba Nyankhnum and Khnumhotep, teaches you how images carry warmth without footnotes. The 2 men share titles in life. In death they share scenes where their noses meet arms. Entwined wives present, but peripheral, the central duet framed like a vow. Scholars will argue their arguments across millennia. The limestone doesn't argue. It just holds the pose and invites the ba to recognize home. You think of the chariot shed where linen smelled faintly of lotus, of the lamp, shared in a valley hut of the beer shop corner, where the drum knew when to hush. Those rooms made choreography. The tomb makes choreography permanent. Eternity is full of paperwork disguised as poetry. Heart scarabs. Ask the heart not to betray the mouth during judgment. Do not stand up against me. A request everyone in Thebes could use on market day. Chapter headings from the Book of Going Forth by Day. Promise that the deceased knows every name of every gatekeeper, every password for every door. If you've ever watched a doorkeeper at a rich man's house test arrivals with 3 polite questions, you already understand the afterlife's bureaucracy. You plan your answers with the dignity you've practiced. Keep mott, feed neighbors, mind the drumbeat, leave the lamp where it can be called a lamp. Erasures speak as loudly as inscriptions. A chisel can love, a chisel can sulk, a chisel can censor. In tomb after tomb, you see where someone in a later generation knocked out a face, shaved off a name, recarved a scene to suit fresh politics. Akhenaten's taste for Aten left sun discs where other gods once stood. After Amarna, hammers walked back through the galleries, putting yesterday's theology into the recycling jar. Hatshepsut's images lose noses and cartouches in a campaign that reads like a long, brittle shrug. Forget her as king, which of course teaches you the opposite. She mattered enough to chisel. When love leaves traces in stone, so does fear. Both are accurate historians. Household erasures are smaller and more domestic. A nickname scratched lightly near a doorway gets sanded smooth by a dutiful nephew. A line in red ink fades because someone rubbed that spot every festival while dusting the offering table. You felt how families run quiet diplomacy with bread and jokes. Now you see the tomb version. A brother's name added to a scene not as a scribe's accident, but because the living decided that the correct afterlife neighborhood includes him at the banquet. The false door becomes a hospitality chart. You sit with the judgment scene the way you sat with the court's cool room. Anubis steadies the scales. Thoth writes results in a hand neater than any village ostracon. Amit waits like a tax you can't evade. The heart plate must balance the feather of Mott, and that feather isn't prudery, it's proportion. Have you taken more than you gave? Were you cruel when a joke would have done? Did you tilt the scale with mockery, the kind that cuts and calls it humor? You remember the aunt who neutralized festival mask with a proverb and more bread. You imagine the feather appreciating her craft. If the heart is light enough, the ba goes on singing. If not, Amit does housekeeping. Even here the rule is familiar. Dignity is the god everyone quietly wants to keep fed. Graffiti talks back to official art like a younger cousin with quick hands. In the valley, a workman scratches his name. And came with my beloved companion, those old words doing their calm work, the present tense, insisting on presence even against the cliff's eternity. Another draws two men under a sun disk, arms draped the way the painters trained every eye to read as closeness. Graffiti is the afterlife of a wink less risky than a proclamation, more durable than a whisper. You realize the city's entire system Shade Delight with has always planned for exactly this, a record that says enough and not too much. Echoes don't stop in Egypt. Centuries later, Greek tourists with opinions will write about customs they half understand. Roman officials will collect taxes and tidy myths. Coptic hymns will braid new sanctities into old neighborhoods. But down in the rock, the older grammar hums. A lotus painted with ridiculous care. A hand laid on an arm with the serenity of a solved equation. A pair seated within one curve of the same banquet table. None of that forgets easily. The desert is good at keeping receipts. You follow a funerary procession in your mind, the way you followed a troop boat at dawn. Mourners wail in the proper key. Professional women beat time with hair and hand. A lector's syllables stack like bricks. The coffin glides like a bark through a sea of dust. At the final door, the opening of the mouth revives all the verbs. Eat, drink, speak, kiss. If you've noticed how a room wakes when the right person steps in, the drummer finds the downbeat, the cat's paws patrol the scent cone remembers its job. Then you know what the ritual is after a restart worthy of a life lived in careful choreography. What of the stories that never got their limestone? They're everywhere between pleats, under roof mats, folded into lamp rosters, threaded through nicknames kept in a chest with bead collars and receipts for onions. You walk past a small shabby tomb where the paint failed and the names ran, and for a moment you feel a practical sorrow. Then you catch a faint coal line on a figure barely visible. One thick stroke, a quiet insistence that a face existed here and planned to keep looking back. It's enough to make you promise good behavior to a wind. Evening settles on the west like a long exhale. Cats resume their jurisdiction. A boy skips home counting his day's copper. A priest locks the last gate. The cliff takes the sun whole and says nothing. You set the dried lotus at the base of a stela that already has more offerings than it needs. The air smells like natron and bread, and a pinch of blue lotus saved for the walk back. You step away lightly, the way a boat leaves a mooring without waking the river, and you keep the city's grammar where you've kept it all along, shade when needed. Delight when offered with when the night is long, and a name steady enough to pass every threshold that matters. Before the lamps die, you catch a breath of resin and linen, the same perfume that follows the dead past every door. Keep that scent. We're about to open the workshop no tourist should see. Here knives are prayers, natron is winter, and bodies become puzzles. Ready to learn why silence sticks to wrappings? Welcome to the horrifying secrets of mummification. You wake to the sound of jackals. Their yipping carries across the sand like gossip from another world. Anubis's messengers reminding you the dead never truly rest. You rub your eyes still sticky with last night's incense smoke and remember what today means. Your first full shift inside the house of purification. It isn't a temple exactly, but it feels holier than anything you've ever stepped into. The walls smell of salt resin and something faintly metallic that no one names aloud. The others are already moving, thin men in linen kilts, their heads shaved smooth, so stray hairs won't insult the corpse. They work with the calm of priests, but the posture of overworked butchers. You shuffle closer, clutching a bundle of fresh linen and trying not to trip over your own sandals. Don't stare too long, the overseer mutters. You glance down anyway. The client, a word they use with eerie cheer, is stretched out on a slanted cedar table. He looks peaceful now, but soon he'll be opened like a secret. Outside, the city of Thebes wakes up too. Vendors shout about fish scribes, sip beer for breakfast, and somewhere a child is learning to write the name Ra for the first time. Life hums busily, indifferent to the fact that right here death is being handled like an art form. You can almost taste the irony, like grit between your teeth. The first task is washing. Buckets of Nile water stand ready mixed with palm wine to purify whatever might offend the gods or the nose. The wine stings your cuts, and you wonder if the gods enjoy the same burning clarity. The senior embalmer dips a linen cloth, wrings it tight, and begins wiping the body as though erasing the memory of disease. Every stain is a word, he says. Clean it, and the gods can read again. You're not sure what that means, but you nod as if enlightenment just struck. The room grows humid from breath and steam. Someone hums a hymn to Anubis, low and rhythmic, like a heartbeat in reverse. On a shelf, bronze tools glint in lamplight, hooks, knives, and tiny scoops. You'd mistake for surgical toys if the stakes weren't eternal life. You ask a foolish question, do they feel anything? Laughter ripples around you, gentle but knowing. Not now, an old embalmer replies. But the soul watches. Treat the body like an audience. You learn quickly that this is no horror show. It's bureaucracy for the afterlife. The wealthy pay for perfection, every gesture certified, every ritual notarized by prayer. You might think of it like ordering a luxury coffin from the best mortuary in town, except here. Quality control is divine judgment. If something goes wrong, it isn't a refund you risk. It's a curse. The overseer instructs you to sweep the floor clockwise. Never Widdershins, he warns, unless you want the KAA to lose its bearings. You try not to roll your eyes. Still, you catch yourself moving carefully, tracing slow circles around the slab. Maybe superstition is just ancient customer service. Then comes your first moment of hesitation. The deceased had once been a scribe. You can tell from the ink stains that even death couldn't bleach away. He must have written contracts, love letters, maybe even complaints about temple taxes. Now he lies silent, while others decide what parts of him deserve to cross eternity. You can't help but wonder who'll handle your body one day. Will someone whisper over you, "Be careful with this one"? He dreamed too much. A gust slips through the open doorway, stirring the curtains. The smell of myrrh and natron dust hits your throat like chalk. Someone jokes that the wind carries whispers from the necropolis, complaints from last week's clients. You laugh along, though part of you listens for real voices. The sun climbs, painting the mud brick walls gold. Heat pushes through the roof reeds, and you wipe sweat with a corner of linen destined for someone's eternal wrapping. Waste nothing, they said. Every scrap has purpose like bureaucracy again, but sacred. You think of modern hospitals with their antiseptic lights, rubber gloves, and soft beeping machines. The difference, perhaps, is that the Egyptians make death look dignified. The same methodical care, but with better art direction. By midday, you've learned to time your breaths between odors, the sweetness of frankincense, the sour tang of decay, the salt of your own skin. One of the veterans catches your grimace and smiles. You'll stop smelling it after a week, he says. Or maybe it's just that it starts smelling like you. You look again at the tools. Each has its own station, each its godly correspondence. The bronze hook for the brain belongs to Thoth, patron of wisdom. The obsidian knife for incision serves under Isis, who once stitched her husband back together. Even the scales used for weighing natron rest before a small statue of Anubis, black jackal head, gleaming. It's not science versus faith here. It's science as faith. When the washing ends, the overseer nods toward the neck chamber, the house of embalming proper. You wipe your hands on your kilt heart, thudding like a drum from the temple across the river. You've crossed a line, though you can't say where. Maybe at the doorway, maybe when you first touched the corpse. Either way, you sense the gods now watching closer than ever. A priest passes by, murmuring verses from the book of Going Forth by Day. The words sound ancient, even to ancient ears. May your soul see again the sun. The body glistens under oil polished for eternity. You whisper the line to yourself, not as a prayer, but as a promise to see, to learn to endure the smell and the silence until you understand what the living owe the dead. Outside, the jackals have gone quiet. Inside, the air stands still, heavy with heat and meaning. Someone opens a jar of cedar oil and the scent swells like applause at the end of a play. You blink dizzy. The overseer claps once briskly. Time, he says. Let's make a god. The door to the next chamber opens with a sigh, and suddenly you're inside a place that feels halfway between a workshop and a temple, if the two ever agreed on the smell of death. Rows of clay jars line the wall, each labeled in neat hieroglyphs, each containing something that used to belong to someone. You don't want to know which ones are still leaking. The senior embalmer gestures toward a painted board hanging on the wall. It's a calendar, but not like the ones you've seen with happy little markets and moon phases. This one's grimly efficient. 70 boxes, scratched in black ink, each marking a day of the embalming process. The clock starts now, he says, tapping the first square. When the last one's crossed out, eternity begins. You count the box's 70 days, the exact time the body must spend in its liminal state between life and resurrection. You wonder who decided that number. Was it a priest, a mathematician, or some poor soul who discovered through trial and error that day 69 left things a little damp? Either way, the 70-day rule has stood for centuries, and you're here to follow it. The first choice facing any client is simple budget or deluxe. The rich choose the royal treatment, a full purification, internal preservation, gilded mask, and personalized spells. Middle-class citizens opt for partial embalming organs, stored in jars, but fewer amulets, maybe a recycled coffin. The poor get what the workers call sand mummification, meaning a shallow grave and a prayer that the desert does the drying for free. You glance toward the scribe's body, your current project, and realize he's somewhere in the middle tier. Enough coin for natron and linen, not enough for gold leaf. You suppose that makes him relatable. Most people, even in death, live on payment plans. The overseer checks his papyrus list, muttering prices. It's like a grim catalog. Removal of viscera, 2 deben of copper. Natron bath, 3 deben. Linen wrapping based on length. In modern terms, you think it's not so different from choosing a hospital package. You pay for comfort, precision, and reputation. Except here, malpractice doesn't just mean a lawsuit. It means eternal humiliation in the underworld. As you scrub the table, the senior embalmer points toward a small shelf of papyri. That's our insurance policy, he says. Spells from the Book of the Dead. We recite the right lines, and the client doesn't come back angry. You eye the parchment nervously. Has that ever failed you? Ask. Only once, he replies. But that was a cat, not a person. The next few hours unfold in slow, sacred monotony. Measurements are taken length of limb width, of chest weight before desiccation. The precision reminds you of a tailor fitting a suit, except the suit is for eternity. The old man explains that a single misstep in proportion could confuse the Ka spirit when it tries to reunite with the body. If the eyes dry too far apart, the soul might miss the entrance, he says matter-of-factly. You nod, pretending that makes perfect sense. The tools are arranged like a surgeon's kit. Each has been cleaned in wine and salt water, an ancient disinfectant that somehow smells both sacred and practical. One apprentice sharpens obsidian blades against a stone, producing a sound that makes your spine hum. These, he says proudly, can cut between worlds. By afternoon, the workroom settles into its rhythm. The chief embalmer, a man with inked forearms and permanent resin stains under his nails, walks you through the delicate hierarchy of the trade. There are the paraschists, the cutters who perform the first incision. The tarichutes, mixers of oils and unguents. The chochites, anointers of the corpse. And finally, the priests who bless every stage. Each rank has a god to please and a payment to collect. It strikes you that mummification is less a medical procedure and more a performance, an orchestrated theater where the audience happens to be invisible. Every gesture must look reverent, every movement symbolic. You've seen less choreography at temple festivals. When the scribe's family enters to check on progress, they carry baskets of offerings, onions, bread, and beer for the workers. He loved onions, one of them says, smiling sadly. The old embalmer nods. Then we'll tuck one near his feet. It's a small detail, but somehow it feels profound. You wonder what tiny thing you'd want carried into eternity, your notebook maybe, or that half-broken pen that's followed you through too many drafts. The family leaves, and the workers resume in silence. The overseer finally turns to you. Tomorrow, he says, we remove what cannot stay. You know what he means, the organs. the soft, perishable parts that make a human feel alive. You nod, pretending calm, but your palms go slick. He laughs softly, sensing your nerves. It's easier than you think, he says. The gods made bodies like granaries open the right door, and everything pours out neatly. You wish you hadn't heard that metaphor. You're told to prepare the natron mixture, equal parts salt, soda, and natron flakes. It crackles faintly as you stir like dry snow underfoot. Someone jokes that it's the only snow Egypt ever sees. The scent burns your nose, but there's something oddly comforting in its simplicity. Salt is salvation. As twilight deepens, the workers light oil lamps and shadows ripple over the body's skin. The waxy gleam makes it look half awake. You feel the first hint of reverence creep into your chest, this strange human stubbornness to preserve what time wants to erase. It's ridiculous and beautiful in equal measure. The overseer dips his brush into dark resin and paints the first hieroglyph on the wall, the Eye of Horus to guard the procedure. The paint smells sharp like honey, turned bitter by heat. You trace the outline in your mind, realizing it's both a prayer and a signature proof that even laborers can leave their mark in eternity, if only on a wall. Someone murmured that the 70 days are generous. The Persians to the east burn their dead, and the Greeks call this whole process barbaric. You smile faintly at the thought. Every civilization has its version of dignity. This one just happens to involve a lot more salt. The lamps flicker as wind hisses through the doorway. The overseer snuffs one out, then another, until only a single flame remains beside the scribe's head. Tomorrow, he repeats, we open the gate. The phrase lands heavy like a sentence you've just been drafted to complete. You take a breath, stare at the flickering light, wondering what the gods think when they see humans turning death into an industry half devotion, half business, but entirely human. The next morning, the air tastes of resin and fear. You stand before the table, and there it is, the scribe's still face half shrouded in linen, as if he's listening for gossip from the living. The senior embalmer places a thin bronze hook into your trembling hands. The nose, he says simply. And that's when you realize what today's lesson really is. He nods toward the nostrils. That, he continues, is the gate to the brain. You open it, you rule it. You can't tell if he's joking. He gestures for you to insert the hook upward through the nasal cavity and stir until the brain liquefies. You freeze. He sighs, gently. Not a milkshake apprentice. The motion is both horrible and fascinating. As you swirl the hook, the air fills with a strange, faintly sweet smell that you'll never forget, part incense, part something personal. The other workers stay calm. To them, it's just another Tuesday. They tilt the head and let the fluid drain out through the nose. Someone hums a hymn to keep rhythm. You catch yourself thinking, if you can hum through this, you can hum through anything. The brain, they explain, isn't important. It's the seat of mucus, not memory, the old man says. The heart thinks not this jelly. You realize that every culture chooses a different organ to glorify. Modern science worships the brain. Ancient Egypt. The heart, a literal record of one's moral weight. You file that thought away, half impressed, half dizzy. Once the skull is empty, they fill it with a blend of melted resin and linen shavings, like stuffing a sacred pillow. The smell sharpens as it cools, leaving the head oddly firm, almost lifelike. See, the old embalmer says, now he can hear the gods without distraction. You try not to imagine the conversation. Then comes the face. Another apprentice brings out a tray of perfumed ointments, lotus, frankincense, myrrh. They're stirred together until the mixture gleams like honey in sunlight. Perfumed cones, the senior explains, to honor both the gods and the living noses. You dab a little onto your arm. The scent clings sweet but heavy, like memory turned into oil. They apply the unguents to the body, massaging it, as if coaxing life back in. For a fleeting moment, it feels like kindness, almost spa-like, if spas included death. You even catch yourself wondering what your modern skincare routine would look like if Egyptian priests designed it. Probably more effective and definitely more expensive. Someone cracks a joke about the royal mummification menu. For the pharaoh, we use the good oil, he says, the kind imported from Byblos. For a scribe, a little less import, a little more imagination. You laugh under your breath because even in the business of death, there's a sense of class hierarchy. Eternity apparently still runs on a budget. The next step involves an incision. The overseer selects a blade of obsidian black as night sharp enough to shame steel. He traces a line along the left flank of the body and slices clean. You flinch at the sound, though it's softer than you expect. The air fills with the earthy aroma of spices and organs that haven't seen daylight in decades. The room falls silent, except for the soft plop of what used to be life. One by one, the embalmers lift the organs, the stomach, liver, lungs, intestines, each destined for its own canopic jar. Remember their names? The old man tells you, tapping the lids. Imseti Hapi Duamutef Kebe Senuef, the 4 sons of Horus. Each one guards a piece of the soul's machinery. Mix up the jars and you've got cosmic paperwork in chaos. The heart, however, stays. It testifies for the dead, the overseer says. In the hall of Ma'at, the heart is weighed against the feather of truth. If it's lighter, the soul passes. If heavier, well, Amit gets a snack. You glance at the heart still pulsing faintly in its crimson glaze of resin, and think that's one courtroom you'd rather not attend. After the extraction, you help rinse the hollowed body with palm wine. Sweet, sour scent coats your throat, and for a moment you think of taverns near the docks, where men laugh over beer while the Nile glitters outside. You wonder if those same men ever imagine how their bodies will be treated when their laughter runs out. Then comes the stuffing. Linen soaked in resin is packed inside, not too tightly, not too loose. Like a mattress for the soul, someone mutters. They add sawdust, spices, and sometimes even onions to absorb moisture. The combination smells like a kitchen that got lost in a temple. You catch yourself thinking this might be the strangest recipe you'll ever help cook. When the incision is done, a wax figure of the goddess Isis is pressed over the wound to heal it symbolically. The logic feels oddly poetic. If death is an injury to the soul, then only a goddess can bandage it. The embalmer nods for you to step back. He sprinkles natron powder across the floor, tracing the outline of the body in shimmering salt. Protection, he says. Also keeps the smell down. It's both faith and Febri's ancient addition. As the workers clean up, you glance at the now hollow body and feel something you didn't expect. Not disgust, but awe. The transformation is beginning. The man who once wrote scrolls for the living is being rewritten for eternity, line by line, stitch by stitch. The overseer notices your expression. Strange, isn't it? He says quietly. How the living carve their own myths with their hands. You nod, suddenly aware of how fragile your own skin feels under the linen wrapping in your arms. Outside, the sun glares white over the necropolis, bleaching color from everything it touches. Inside, the lamplight softens the horror, turning it into ceremony. You realize this is how they survive it. Ritual turns revulsion into reverence. It's not denial. It's discipline. Before leaving, the overseer presses a cone of scented wax into your hand. Burn this tonight, he says. Let the smell follow you home. It reminds the soul that you were kind. You clutch it tight. Somehow, in the middle of salt and shadows, that feels like the most human instruction you've heard all day. The heart still beats in silence, even after the chest is empty. That's what the old embalmers say, and this morning you start to believe them. The air inside the house of embalming feels heavier than usual, thick with natron dust that glows faintly under the morning sun. You step closer to the table and realize the scribe's body no longer looks human. It's halfway between flesh and parchment, its surface drying into soft folds like a scroll waiting for ink. The overseer gestures toward the canopic jars you arranged yesterday. 4 clay guardians, each carved with divine head. A man, a baboon, a jackal, and a falcon. They stare back at you with the blank authority of customs officers, checking luggage at the gates of eternity. Make sure you remember which is which, the overseer warns, or you'll have a liver trying to talk to a jackal for the next 1,000 years. He isn't joking. Each jar has a soul's correspondence. Imsity guards the liver, Happy the lungs, Duamutef the stomach, and Kebe Senuef the intestines. You recite them like a student before an exam, trying not to imagine the afterlife. Customer complaints if you mix them up. The embalmer explains that these jars are more than containers, they're contracts. They carry promises between humans and gods, pledges that say, "We've done our part. Now do yours." You run your fingers along the painted glyphs, feeling the indentations of prayers pressed into clay. The jars are capped and sealed with resin, and for the first time, you realize the elegance of Egyptian engineering faith, packaged like an art form. The next step, the overseer says, is the eternal weather forecast. The body must be dried, purified, and balanced with natron so it doesn't rot. It sounds clinical, but to them, it's sacred chemistry. You lift a scoop of the white crystals, they sparkle under lamplight, tiny pyramids of salt. Natron comes from the Wadi Natrun, the old man explains. A gift from Ra himself. He bakes it with sunlight, we borrow it for holiness. They fill the cavity with linen soaked in oil, and then heap more natron over the entire body, like snow burying a statue. You cough as the powder rises, coating your arms. Don't breathe too deeply, someone murmurs, unless you want a preserved throat. The body will stay like this for 40 days, half the 70-day process. During that time, you'll check the progress like a baker peeking into the oven. Too much moisture left, and the gods will wrinkle their noses. Too little and the skin cracks. The balance between sacred and grotesque is thin as papyrus. While waiting, you help clean the tools, soaking them in palm wine and polishing them until the bronze catches the light. Why so careful, you ask? The senior embalmer shrugs. Because the tools remember. If we offend the gods with carelessness, they'll cut our own journey short. He smiles, then adds, besides, a dull blade dishonors both the living and the dead. It's strange you think how modern surgeons still say something similar. You remember seeing a hospital show once, someone shouted scalpel with the same reverence these men give to obsidian knives. Perhaps all civilizations share one instinct to turn fear into precision. On the 5th day, you help open Natron Pit to check the scribe's condition. The crystals slide off like sand from marble, revealing a body thinner, darker, more statue than man. The skin is tight, almost glossy. You can see the curve of ribs and the hint of a smile stiffened into permanence. He's doing well, the overseer says, as if commenting on bread dough. The gods like their work dry. You glance at the canopic jars resting nearby. Each one is sealed and tagged with ink symbols. You realize the jars might outlast everything the city. the priests, maybe even the language itself. Somewhere in the future, someone might dig them up, stare at their painted eyes, and wonder what secrets they held. You almost envy that kind of mystery. A small accident breaks your daydream. One of the apprentices drops a jar and the lid cracks clean in half. Everyone freezes. The overseer's face turns the color of dust. "Fix it," he whispers before Happy gets offended. You scramble to patch it with melted resin while the others mutter prayers. The room smells of hot wax and panic. You manage to reattach the lid, though slightly crooked. The overseer sighs. "Well," he says, "let's hope the lungs have a sense of humor." After the tension passes, the old embalmer pulls you aside. "Do you know why we care so much?" he asks. You shake your head. Because one mistake in this world becomes a lifetime of chaos in the next. We're not preserving flesh. We're maintaining order. You think about that for a while. It's an elegant philosophy. Death as administration, the body as paperwork for eternity. The chamber quiets as workers finish sealing the last jars. Outside, the desert wind wails across the necropolis, sounding almost human. You wipe your face and catch a glimpse of yourself reflected in the polished resin of a jar's surface. You look older already, as if the salt and dust have begun to embalm you too. Someone lights a cone of incense, and fragrant smoke curls toward the ceiling beams, wrapping the air in honeyed calm. The smell hides the human odor of what you've done. You breathe it in, grateful. Then you notice the small statue of Anubis near the doorway. Its jackal eyes seem to gleam more than usual, almost amused. "You think he watches us?" you ask quietly. Always, says the senior embalmer, especially when we start to believe we understand death. You step back, wiping the last bit of natron from the body's arm. The skin beneath it is smooth and cool, not lifeless, so much as paused. You don't say it aloud, but you think maybe that's the point. Egyptians never tried to stop death, they just wanted to trick it into napping. The overseer rolls up the papyrus schedule, crosses off another square, and nods. "The drying begins," he says. "Let's see how well the desert remembers its own recipe." The chamber smells like a storm of salt. You can taste it when you breathe, the sting of natron heavy on your tongue, the dryness clinging to your lips. It's the 38th day, and the overseer finally lets you uncover the scribe's body from its white cocoon of crystals. You brush the natron aside with your hands, and the sound it makes, soft, crisp whispering, reminds you of snow sliding off a roof. Except this snow preserves instead of melts. The body underneath looks startlingly clean, almost peaceful. The skin is drawn tight and tanned smooth as sun-baked leather. You think of old parchment ready for new writing. "He's lost about 70% of his moisture," the senior embalmer says, approvingly. "That means he's almost holy." You nod, half amused by how science and sacredness mingle here. It's both anatomy and theology in one breath. You help lift the body from the salt bed. It feels feather light, as if the soul already took most of its weight with it. You place it onto the cedar board again, and the old man starts inspecting each part. "See here," he says, poking gently at the fingertips. "If you don't treat them now, they curl." The gods don't shake hands with claws. He hands you a small brush dipped in resin. Together you coat the skin with layer after layer of oil, cedar myrrh, lotus juniper. The scent swells until the air becomes thick and golden like honey caught in sunlight. You can't tell if it's beautiful or suffocating, but you know it's powerful. For the Egyptians, smell isn't decoration, it's divine signature. To smell pleasant is to be close to godliness. As you work, you notice tiny details. The eyelashes are gone. The lips have pulled slightly back, revealing teeth that look like pearls in brown sand. You ask if that should be fixed. The overseer laughs softly. No one smiles in eternity, he says. We leave that to the living. Then comes one of the most delicate tasks, filling out the features that time and salt have erased. A paste made from resin and sawdust is used to restore shape. You dab it beneath the cheeks, along the nose bridge, even inside the fingertips. The work feels almost intimate, as though you're sculpting a memory, rather than a body. A good embalmer, the old man murmurs, is part artist, part liar. You raise an eyebrow. Liar, of course. We pretend death isn't ugly. You glance at the others working nearby, one polishing a skull, another sewing up a split ankle with linen thread. The sound of needles piercing skin echoes faintly rhythmic and strange. You wonder if any of them ever think about what they're really doing, restoring a person who can't thank them, beautifying silence itself. Around you, the walls glimmer with hieroglyphs painted in ochre and black. Some depict Anubis bending over a mummy. Others show Osiris waiting in the afterlife, arms open. You trace one with your finger. Why paint these here, you ask? The overseer replies, so the dead know the directions home. A few feet away, an apprentice carries in more natron, sweeping up the spent powder from the floor. Even used natron is sacred, he says proudly. We sell it to perfume merchants. They say it keeps the scent of the afterlife. You laugh quietly. In a strange way, nothing really goes to waste. Even decay gets recycled. Later, the sun slants through the high window, catching the thin shimmer of salt floating in the air. You close your eyes and imagine being buried under that brightness, preserved perfectly, waiting centuries for someone to brush the dust away and whisper your name. Would that count as immortality or just good storage? The overseer breaks your reverie. Watch the eyelids, he warns. They collapse if left open. He demonstrates by placing 2 tiny pads of linen under each eyelid, soaked in resin, then presses them gently shut. See, now he sleeps. You feel a quiet ache in your chest. Sleep is what they call it, but you know it's a sleep no dawn will break. Next, you turn to the hands. The fingers have shriveled slightly, and the nails look ghostly pale. The embalmer dips them in oil, then paints each one with henna, an old tradition said to please Hathor, goddess of beauty. Even the dead appreciate good grooming, he quips. You chuckle. Maybe heaven really does judge first impressions. The room is still, except for the rustle of linen and the crackle of lamps. Someone whispers a prayer to Thoth for precision, and you find yourself joining in. You don't even know the words by heart yet, but the rhythm feels right, part chant, part heartbeat. When the body is finally clean, oiled and reshaped, the overseer steps back and nods. Now we rest him under fresh natron for another stretch, he says. The salt remembers what we forget. You realize he's not just talking about preservation. He means time itself. Egypt has always tried to freeze what the rest of the world lets decay. Beauty power order. You wonder if that's the real secret of mummification. Not immortality, but resistance. You help carry the linen-wrapped figure to the drying chamber again. The workers lower him into the pit, with a care you'd expect from midwives, not morticians. Every motion is slow, deliberate. He'll stay for 20 more days, the overseer says. By then he'll be lighter than memory. Outside, a sandstorm is rising. You can hear it hissing against the mud brick walls, a million grains of time scratching to get in. You look toward the doorway where the horizon blurs into gold and smoke. Egypt, you think, is a place built to outlast itself, every grain of sand a timekeeper, every corpse a story waiting to dry. The overseer sets down his tools and wipes his brow. Tomorrow, he says, we bring him out for the next stage. The binding begins. He glances at you, half smiling. Get some rest, apprentice. You'll need steady hands. Once we start wrapping, even the gods judge the neatness of our folds. You nod, exhausted, but unable to stop staring at the still form beneath the salt. Somewhere deep inside, you feel it, the quiet awe of realizing you've just helped a human being cross the threshold between dust and divinity. The morning begins with fire. Not the kind that burns flesh, but the kind that releases perfume. The workers heat small bowls of resin and bitumen until they bubble like dark honey. The air thickens with the smell of pine tar, and incense sweet enough to make your head swim. This, says the overseer, waving his hand through the smoke, is how we varnish the soul. You blink through the haze, watching the black syrup drip from the ladle onto the dried body. It seeps into every wrinkle, glistening in the lamplight like oil spilled on water. Be quick, the senior embalmer warns. Resin waits for no man. You move fast, spreading it across the skin with a linen pad, each stroke careful as a painter's brush. The heat sticks to your arms and your fingertips tack together. Egyptians call this process the anointing of eternity. To them, resin isn't just protection from decay. It's a language between humans and gods. Every layer whispers, "We remember you. Stay whole." You can almost believe it. The way the resin catches the light, it feels alive, shimmering like dark glass. The body, now almost bronze in color, begins to shine. Cedar oil, the old man murmurs, dribbling more over the limbs. Imported from the Levant. Expensive enough to bankrupt a farmer, but good enough for a god. He glances at you with a smirk. If you die poor, expect less fragrance. You laugh softly, but there's truth in the joke. The embalming business runs on a spectrum of luxury. The richest bodies gleam like statues, varnished with layers of imported resins, pistacia, myrrh, frankincense, even imported pine from faraway mountains. The poorest, a quick dip in local bitumen, black and sticky, sold by the jar in markets like cheap perfume. As you stir another pot of resin, you ask how these materials travel across deserts and seas. The old man grins. Caravans, he says. Ships. Traders. The dead keep commerce alive. Without us, half the ports of the world would go hungry. You chuckle. Somewhere in Byblos or Crete, merchants are counting their profits, thanks to Egyptian death. When the coating dries, the overseer runs his hand along the body's chest. Smooth, he says, like obsidian. The resin sets like armor, sealing every pore. You realize it's both shield and disguise, hiding what death took while pretending nothing changed. For a moment, you imagine modern morticians doing something similar, polishing caskets, styling hair, spraying perfume. Different materials, same instinct, make death look presentable. Maybe humanity has always been addicted to denial, dressed as devotion. One apprentice enters carrying a jar of darker mixture bitumen, thick and gloppy as tar. For the finish, he says. The overseer nods but leans close to you. We don't use that on nobles, he whispers. Only in later times when the priests got lazy and merchants got greedy. It looks impressive, but it hides sloppy work. He dips his brush into the black paste anyway, spreading a thin layer over one arm. The color deepens instantly, rich and glassy. See, he says. Even fake holiness shines if you polish it enough. You can't help smiling at that, a proverb worthy of any century. The old man continues coating, humming an off-key tune. Long ago, he says, before bitumen, we used pure resin from trees so rare, the priests guarded them like treasure. Then trade changed, the resin ran out, and we found cheaper beauty. That's how civilizations fade, not with war, but with substitutions. His words linger in your mind. You look at the blackened figure on the table, glossy and silent, and realize you're staring at both miracle and compromise. The next task is delicate pouring hot resin into the abdominal cavity to seal it completely. The mixture crackles when it hits the dry tissue, releasing a hiss like distant rain. "Listen," the overseer says softly. "That's the sound of the body saying goodbye to moisture forever." You help tilt the body to spread the resin evenly, then wedge linen plugs into the nostrils and ears. Even the tiniest hole, he warns, can let the desert in. You nod, sealing each opening as if tucking secrets away. When the work pauses, the old embalmer brings over a small dish of oil mixed with powdered malachite. "For the eyes," he says. He paints thin green lines above the lids, recreating the cosmetic style of the living. If he meets the gods, he should look like himself. You think of mirrors in modern funerals of families fixing collars or smoothing hair, little gestures that say, "We still recognize you." As you set down the brush, a warm gust sweeps through the doorway, carrying desert dust that glitters in the resin fumes. You catch the scent of the Nile, faintly mud-water papyrus, and it reminds you that life still moves outside. The city of the living is just across the river, yet here time feels trapped in amber. The overseer wipes his hands, leaving streaks of black across his palms. He's ready for linen, he declares, but not just any wrapping. Every bandage must carry meaning. He glances at you. Tomorrow you'll learn that words can be woven. You clean the brushes in silence, dipping them into bowls of wine until the liquid turns the color of dusk. Around you, the embalmers hum to themselves. Some talk about dinner, others about the latest temple gossip, how a priest accidentally mixed beer into the offering jar. Life, as always, goes on in absurd harmony with death. As you leave the chamber, you glance back at the glimmering figure on the table. Under the flickering lamps, the scribe looks immortal already, his body sealed under layers of gold-brown gloss. You wonder if the gods will notice the small imperfections, the uneven brushstrokes, the tiny bubble near the shoulder, or if, like everyone else, they'll just be dazzled by the shine. You step out into the evening air. The sky bleeds orange over the desert, and for a fleeting second the horizon itself looks embalmed, painted in resin by the sun. You've wrapped gifts before, but never one meant for eternity. The linen gleams under the torchlight, pale as moonlight over the Nile. Miles of it stacked neatly on a low table, waiting for your hands. The overseer runs his fingers along the edge of the first roll and says, "Every strip is a sentence." Together, they tell a story. You realize that today, you're not just preparing a body, you're writing a biography without ink. The scribe's form lies ready coated in resin, glossy and hard. You touch his arm gently. It's cool, smooth, and unyielding. He's more statue than man now, you whisper. "Good," the old embalmer replies. "Statues last." He teaches you to start at the toes. Each bandage must overlap precisely by the width of 2 fingers. Too loose, he warns, and time will get in. Too tight, and the linen tears. You wrap twist-tuck. The rhythm becomes hypnotic, almost musical. After a few minutes, your hands move on their own. Guided by something older than instruction, muscle memory passed through centuries. As the wrapping continues, the overseer hands you small charms, an amulet. Each one goes in a specific place, he says. The green scarab rests over the heart. The eye of Horus slides between the brows. Tiny copper snakes coil near the ankles. These are more than decorations, he adds. They're passwords. The gods read them when the soul travels. You look down at the growing map of trinkets and wonder what if someone mistranslates. A misplaced amulet could send a soul to the wrong gate. Has that ever happened, you ask? The old man chuckles. We would know. No one's come back with complaints. He ties a strip of red linen around the chest, the blood of Isis, he calls it, and begins murmuring lines from the Book of the Dead. You catch fragments, may your limbs be strong, may your mouth speak again. The words sound more like a lullaby than a prayer. Maybe that's all mummification really is, a careful tucking in for the longest sleep imaginable. When you pause to stretch your aching hands, one of the younger apprentices brings over a bowl of honeyed beer. To steady your fingers, he says with a grin, you take a sip and cough. It's warm and bitter, but it helps. You joke that the scribe should get one too. Oh, he will, the overseer replies. We pour a drop through the bandages. Beer is good company for the road. Hours pass. The body disappears under linen layer after layer until only the face remains. The overseer kneels beside you and whispers, "Be gentle here. The face is where the soul recognizes itself." He hands you the finest cloth woven thin, nearly translucent, and you lay it across the cheeks with the same care you'd give a newborn. As you press the folds into place, the old man begins to talk about a legend a mummy once wrapped so perfectly that Anubis himself mistook it for a god. That's what we aim for. He says softly. Not imitation conviction. You smile at the thought. Convincing death to hesitate, that's a bold kind of faith. You notice the others whispering as they work. Some hum fragments of hymns, others mutter jokes to chase away the solemn air. You join in when one of them says, "Imagine unwrapping yourself 1,000 years from now. Would you be proud of your handiwork?" You laugh, though you secretly wonder what that would look like. Your hands preserved in someone else's story. The amulets keep coming. Wedjat eyes, Dijed pillars, tiny golden eggs. You learn the meanings: protection, stability, eternal life. The overseer tells you that scribes often hide messages between the layers, a single line of hieroglyphs, wishing luck or forgiveness. You slip one in too, your first unsupervised gesture. May your stories never fade. When the final layer covers the face, the overseer takes a thin brush and paints a line of ochre across the forehead. This, he says, marks the boundary between silence and speech. Then with a small knife, he carves a notch above the lips. For the mouth-opening ceremony later, he explains, every dead man deserves to speak again. You step back and study your work. The wrapped figure looks strangely powerful, no longer fragile or pitiful. The linen gleams like polished ivory, smooth and symmetrical. You can almost imagine it breathing. He's ready, the overseer says. For his mask. But before that, he points to a final ritual inserting scrolls of papyrus into the bandages. These are spells, insurance policies for the afterlife. You slide one into the crook of the arm, another along the thigh. Each carries a verse invoking gods and warnings for demons. You ask if the demons ever actually come. Always, he says. But words are stronger than teeth. The scent of resin and smoke fills the air again as the last knot is tied. You feel both exhausted and oddly peaceful. The work has rhythm, purpose, beauty, a strange comfort in the mechanical. Maybe that's why Egyptians feared chaos so much. Order keeps grief busy. Before leaving, you look down at the finished mummy. It no longer resembles a man, but something deliberate, sacred, and strangely serene. You think of modern people who wrap keepsakes in tissue, tucking them into drawers to preserve what time can't touch. Perhaps you're doing the same thing, just on a grander scale. The overseer rests his hand on your shoulder. Tomorrow, he says, will give him a face the gods can recognize. The mask will remind heaven who he was, and maybe remind us who we are. You nod, wiping resin dust from your hands. The chamber grows quiet except for the faint flutter of the linen ends in the breeze, like whispers or maybe laughter slipping between worlds. The chamber smells of glue gold and quiet awe. Sheets of cartonnage linen, stiffened with plaster, lie drying in the corners shaped to the curve of a human face. The overseer picks one up carefully, the way a priest would lift a relic. A mask, he says, isn't just decoration. It's identity made visible. You look at the half-finished piece. Its surface is rough, still waiting for paint and inlay. "We'll give him eyes that never close," the old embalmer mutters. The gods must see they're dealing with someone worth remembering. Today's task feels more like artistry than anatomy. The workers mix plaster in small bowls, adding crushed limestone and gum arabic. The scent is sharp, like wet chalk. They pour it onto strips of linen and smooth them over the mummy's face to form a mold. When it hardens, they lift it gently, revealing the hollow imprint of features that once smiled, frowned, and argued over ink pots. This is his final portrait, the overseer says. If eternity asks who he was, we show this. While the plaster sets, you prepare the coffin boards. 3 layers of wood sycamore for strength, cedar for scent, and acacia for luck are joined together with pegs, not nails. Nails, you're told, offend Osiris. They trap the soul inside. We give the body a home, the overseer explains, not a prison. You help sand the surface smooth, the scent of wood dust mingling with the sweetness of resin. It feels oddly comforting, like working in a carpenter's shop. Many coffins are reused, one apprentice says casually. Scrape the name, paint a new one. No one notices. You blink. You mean second-hand coffins? He grins. Even the dead recycle. He's not wrong. In poorer tombs, archaeologists have found names, scratched out faces, repainted coffins, borrowed and returned like temporary beds. It's strangely human death, too. Obeys the economics of life. You imagine some poor priest quietly repainting hieroglyphs at midnight, muttering, "Sorry, my lord, nothing personal." The mask is dry now. You run your fingers over the plaster. It's cool and light, as if waiting for a soul to move in. The artists bring their pigments: red ochre for skin, black for eyebrows, green for rebirth, gold for divinity. Gold, they say, is the flesh of the gods. It doesn't tarnish, doesn't age, doesn't apologize. You dip a brush into gold leaf and trace the lips. The shine catches the lamp's glow, turning the mouth into sunlight. That's it, the old man says. Give him a voice of light. He shows you how to paint the eyes wide, almost unnervingly alive. The living see with water, he says. The dead see with fire. As you paint, you remember seeing museum mummies in glass cases, those same gold faces staring eternally outward. People whisper in front of them, half in reverence, half in disbelief. But here, in the warmth of oil lamps and the smell of cedar, the work feels intimate, not eerie. You're not making a relic. You're finishing a person. When the paint dries, they polish the mask with linen until it gleams. Then, with careful hands, you lower it over the wrapped head. It clicks softly into place, a perfect fit. The transformation is instant. The anonymous bundle of linen becomes someone again, a scribe ready to meet his gods. The overseer steps back, crossing his arms. He looks wealthy.